Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Almost Dropouts podcast. I'm your host, Davik, and today I have Colin with me. Colin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm super happy to be here, Davik. But my name is Colin Thompson. I'm originally from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. Grew up in Los Angeles, and I'm the co-founder of a company called Intrepid. And essentially, what we do is we make it really easy for companies to find, hire, manage, pay remote employees and freelancers all around the world. So I'm really interested at the intersection of remote work and how that's transforming industry and how it helps people collaborate and build bonds across cultures. And that's mostly what I've been working on lately. So, in terms of a small history about me, that's kind of what I'm focused on right now.
hmm Yeah, and I got to meet Colin a couple months ago. We connected through one of those startup channels. So it was really great to get to meet Colin and get to hear his story. He has such an interesting story and background. So I think Colin, I think we should just start off with that. I know you give a little bit of a background about what you're doing right now and where you're from, but
Sure.
let's start from the beginning. Let's go through it. So
Well,
um,
I'll give you a little Tarantino twist, right? So, my company
okay,
is called Intrepid.
right.
And the reason why it's meaningful to me and it kind of connects with this story is I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and I met somebody who was studying on a Fulbright scholarship. And I was telling her my story. I was like, I'm a shoe designer. I moved to Hong Kong, and this is my brand. And she just said, Colin, how intrepid of you. And I always remembered
Okay.
that word. And so I was just like, okay, like for some reason, people see me as a kind of adventurous, but albeit ambitious person. So that kind of word stuck with me. But really, my story, I'm very Canadian. So my story
Mhm.
started. I, like most Canadians, wanted to play hockey. So I started playing hockey, but I didn't know how to skate. And so, coming from an immigrant Caribbean family, they thought it was really bizarre that their kid wanted to play hockey.
Right.
um, but my mom had always been really, really wanted to assimilate into Canadian culture, and she watched a lot of sports, particularly in figure skating, because
Mhm.
Canada has such a deep and rich history in figure skating. So she said, "Colin, if you want to learn how to skate, you should take figure skating lessons." And I was like, "Okay, fine. Like as long as I can get on the ice and I can be a better hockey player, no problem."
Right.
And you know, from there, I ended up becoming really good at it. Like, I don't know why. And I think, to my parents' surprise, it was the same. And I ended up winning a couple of national championships, one at the novice level and then one at the junior level. And I was a part of the Canadian national figure skating team for about a decade.
Mhm.
So, while doing that, I was kind of rebellious, and I was one of the first Canadians to leave Canada and train in another country, which was
Right.
a really big issue, a really, really big issue. And I trained in the United States. I trained in California, in Southern California, in the
Right.
San Bernardino Mountains, about a couple hours away from Los Angeles. And that's where I actually grew up with people like Michelle Kwan and some of the best figure skaters in the world. And it was really there that being in Southern California and Los Angeles, you kind of got into Hollywood and the movies and the entertainment industry. So
Right.
as I kind of quit ice skating, I decided that I was going to come back to Canada because I'd spent most of my teen years outside of Canada away from my family. So I ended up going to York University and studying film.
Right.
And that's where uh, really one of the biggest twists in my life kind of took off, where it was I was, as a studying film, I wanted to be like a Tarantino, or I wanted to be like what's the guy's name that does the Batman movies?
Oh, Nolan?
Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
So Darren Aronofsky, Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, all the big kind of like directors that are out
Mhm.
now. We were all like kind of the similar age, either in film school or like trying to make like independent films, right? And so that was
Right.
kind of my track. And during classes, between classes, I stacked all my classes because because of my skating, I won a scholarship to for the Royal Bank, and I had a full-time job working at the Royal Bank of Canada. So I only went to school 2 days a week, a
Mhm.
Monday and like Tuesday morning, and then I worked the rest of my way through school. But one of the days that I would stay like in school, I would actually go to the film library and I'd watch films. And my favorite films that I came across was by this director named Wong Kar-wai, just an amazing director.
Mhm.
And his films were all about Hong Kong. And so I got this real romantic idea of what Hong Kong was about. So, you know, after I'd finished, graduated from university, and one of my friends out of the blue from my skating days reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to come to Hong Kong and teach ice skating?" So I was
Right.
like, "Hell yeah, I want to come to Hong Kong." And at the time, I was working at the Royal Bank of Canada in a small department, the media and entertainment team, which was a part of RBC Ventures. And we were funding and financing Canadian films, many of the massive game companies, and many of the animation studios that are in Canada. And as you know, like that's a very strong sector for Canada is game development, animation, and kind of creative and digital art. So we were actually a very specialized boutique financial arm of the Royal Bank doing those things. So it was a really good job. And
Mhm.
like at like 23, 24, to be just finished university and to have that job, like it was a really big deal. But I ended up going to Hong Kong on vacation and then sending them my resignation letter as soon as I landed. So my parents thought I was crazy. My friends thought I was
Right.
crazy, right? But I just remember getting off the plane in Hong Kong and like coming through on the MTR at nighttime and seeing like the skyscrapers and just seeing like this is like right at a Blade Runner. So I was like
Right.
I was just like I'm gonna figure something out. I'm gonna stay here, and that was kind of like the real one of the major turning points in my life. And but like what I had to do is I had to figure out what I was going to do. So I taught ice skating for a while,
Right.
and I got enough money together, and I was just like, okay, well, what am I going to do? I can't teach ice skating for the rest of my life. It's not what I want to do. I'm not going to go back into banking. And I ended up interviewing for Wong Kar-wai's company, but they didn't hire me. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to be in the film industry. My brother at the time was a professional skateboarder. So
Mhm.
he had like a t-shirt brand. So I actually ended up going up to Shenzhen, which is a border town uh, uh, in the southern part of China, very close to Hong Kong, and it's a lot of where the manufacturing and knockoff goods are. And I just saw how many knockoff sneakers they had, and I was like, well, that might be kind of cool. I was like, it's I could be creative. It's not film, but I was like, I could make little movies and I could tell stories around a product. I was like, okay, but I don't know how to design shoes. I've never designed a shoe before. I don't even know how to draw. And but I was like, well, if they can make these fake ones, they can make some real ones. So I went home. I drew out these awful, awful designs, just awful. And I ended
Right.
up like just sending them out to a bunch of factories. And one of the factories actually got back to me and said, "Hey, do you want to meet?" And I was like, "Sure." And he was just like, "I think you're really interesting." And I go, "There's something here about your shoes." I don't know what this guy was looking at because it was the most like it was like a 5-year-old's children's drawing. And he's like, "There's something here." He goes, "I want
Right.
to make your shoes." But I think what it was he was just somebody that was interested in meeting somebody new from a different culture with different ideas. And he didn't want to work with the same kind of companies
Right.
that he was working for. So he ended up making like about like 200 pairs of shoes for me based off of this kind of drawing that I made. So I sent a couple of them back to Canada, and my brother sold them at the skateboard park in Mississauga in like an hour. And he was like, "Do you have more?" And I was
Mhm.
like, "Yeah, I got more." And so I sent a few more, and then he sold those. And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna come back and like let's see if we can sell the rest of these." And I remember I brought like maybe like 200 and something pairs of shoes, rocked down to the 905 skate park, opened up our car trunk, and just kids came flocking and wanted to buy these shoes. And I was just like, these kids crazy.
Right.
And it was like $20 or $30 a pair. They were all trying them on in the skate park. And I just thought to
Mhm.
myself, like, I was like, well, why do you like about these? They're just like, Craig is an awesome skateboarder. And like he wears these. And like it's so cool you guys have your own sneaker brand. Like, how did you do that? And I just realized it was like, there was something about them like they didn't understand the whole process of what it took to make these things because it's just not part of like the Canadian culture like or manufacturing or being able to kind of access these things. So they kind of just bought into that
Right.
story. So I sold her the shoes and I was just like, I guess this is something I can do. And so I ended up just learning Adobe Illustrator and getting better at drawing, hanging out in factories and meeting more people and getting better at my craft and, participating in events and reaching out to people. And there's been just a lot of people that along the way, even though my stuff wasn't good at a specific time, they were always just very encouraging. Other artists, other designers, fashion designers. And, I just ended up getting better. And the company actually grew to be pretty significant. We had maybe 250 accounts around the world. Our biggest buying country was Japan, followed by France, which was Paris. And then we ended up opening up 2 mono-branded stores in Taipei where I only sold our products. And so the line expanded to about we had maybe about 15 different styles of shoes and 5 to 7 different colorways. I had a whole collection of bags. I had sunglasses. I had small leather goods. So it was a really kind of significant brand. And it was just something that I had taught myself how to do through just interest and the internet and meeting people, right? And don't get me wrong, it was really hard kind of getting by in Hong Kong for the early days, right? But really what motivated me was a sense of accomplishment. And so I ended up selling that company because what ended up happening, I just got really bored of the manufacturing and the logistics and the supply chain issues of doing a fashion brand from Hong Kong and trying to distribute to the rest of the world. And there was something about physical goods that I was just not really interested in doing anymore. And so I decided hey, my investors were kind of, really excited about what I was doing with supply chains and what I was doing with e-commerce. And remember, this is 2009 or 2010. And to me, it was just what I had to do out of necessity to get by. But they were really interested in what I was doing with e-commerce and supply chains. And so I decided I was okay, well, maybe I can, I was the mobile phone just came out, iPhone came out, people are really interested in that. Maybe there's something I can do with that would give me a little bit more scale for, my interests and being creative and impacting people. And it was then I had decided maybe I'll go back to school, so I ended up going to the Harvard Business School, doing a really great program for a year and a half there. And I came back and I was just okay, technology, I've got some experience in venture capital. People are really interested in technology in the venture capital space. So I ended up, connecting with some friends in Hong Kong and in Asia. They call them family offices. And what it is, it's a very wealthy family that is trying to professionalize their operation. And what I mean by professionalize is bring in people from the outside to expand their business. And so I met a family office and they're we have this, they were a real estate family, which is common in Asia. Right. And they were hey, we've got this really great space in Central. So Central in Hong Kong was the most expensive place in the world. And they had about 8,000 square feet of literally just filled with nothing. It was an amazing place. And it was what it was he goes, I realized we were looking at the space. Why are we not collecting any rent off this space? And I asked my dad, and he said, that's, your uncle's. And then he asked his uncle and he goes, oh, that's where my, one of my girlfriends keeps all her stuff. So it was just it was an 8,000 square foot closet. Right. So we cleared it out and we redesigned it and we created one of I would say it was intended to be a venture studio. It ended up being just a really fancy office. But that was the kind of the concept where I was that would be different, where it would be combining the concepts of a accelerator and a venture capital company and an organization all together, right? And these are all kind of concepts and things that I had learned at HBS. And it was one of the first kind of initial concepts around what was a venture studio. And this is 2012, 2013. So really, really early, because that wasn't even really done in America at that time. Nobody really got it, but it still ended up being quite a significant fund and place for people to get financing, right? But I ended up, after we raised about $50 million for that particular fund and made a few investments. And so I got the kind of bug for VC again in technology. And then so I was I don't want to do consumer apps. So I'm I know I want to do technology. I want to do applications, mobile and all that kind of stuff. But I want to do something more impactful. I want to do something more cutting edge. And this was kind of like, my coming back from my background in, say, fashion, or being kind of like this rebellious type of intrepid spirit, if you will. And so at the time, Bitcoin it had gone from $300 or $100 to $1,000, and everybody's going crazy. And a girl that I was dating at the time was really into Bitcoin. And I was just like, what is this thing?
Right.
What is this? So I actually went and I checked it out. Right. And so this has been a major lesson that I've learned, is investigate your skepticism. You may have a bias, or you may think something is dumb, but until you literally investigate it and decide for yourself with like a thorough investigation, like, keep an open mind. So I was like, let me investigate my skepticism. And I remember I went to YouTube. Again, like another great resource is YouTube. YouTube is like one of the greatest inventions ever, right? But I went to YouTube, and the first video that I saw about Bitcoin was a TEDx talk by Charles Hoskinson. So he's one of the founders of Cardano, which my story connects with a little bit later with that. And I was like, wow, this is actually pretty amazing. This is exactly the kind of things that I'm looking for. A new paradigm technology, a new paradigm shift, a new technology platform, this concept of decentralization, of sovereignty, a new monetary system. Like, these are all really cutting edge, and it's new. So I'm like, okay, I can stake a claim for myself and create an identity that might be a little bit more unique. And the second video that I watched was the introductory video. It was a very obscure video of Vitalik. And so I actually ended up like that day connecting with Charles Hoskinson, having a really long conversation with him. And we were talking about blockchain and stuff like that. And a couple of days later, I had a very interesting conversation with Vitalik, very unknown at the time. Like, you could literally just he had Skype. So you could Skype message him, and you would talk, and he would answer questions and all this kind of really great stuff, right? So I was like, okay, what would be cool would be a blockchain venture studio, right? So this is 2013, right? So I was like, and I think I'll call it Intrepid, right? So at the time, it was just myself,
right?
And so, I was like, okay, let me do this. And I was just like, okay, this will be just weird enough for me to actually partake upon. And, I don't know how I'll start. Maybe I'll start blogging and getting people to understand this, because every time I talk to somebody, they'd be just like, isn't that Bitcoin? No, that's garbage. That's crazy. That's stupid. Right. And so I just started, because the major question everybody asks is, what they would be like, isn't that Bitcoin? Blockchain. What's blockchain? Isn't that Bitcoin? I'm like, no, it's a little bit different. And so I started blogging about it, and that's where I kind of got a little bit more, interest in, what we were doing with the studio. I met a friend who I still work with today, who was trying to recruit me to be an innovation leader at a very large insurance company out here in Asia. I didn't end up getting the job, but we became friends, and we started working together. And he was he was the first person I turned, like it's like the Hunger Games or something like that, or turn to the blockchain. I remember he was just like, we were sitting down, he was just like, isn't that Bitcoin? Because I don't know. And then I explained it to him. He's like, yo, I don't know about all that stuff, Colin. That sounds crazy. He's like, but let's try it, So he ended up introducing me, we started talking to a few people. And there was one guy who was crazy enough to do something. And he was actually the chief innovation officer for AIA Insurance. And he said, I'll give you $200,000 if you can make us an app, some kind of an app using blockchain. And that was how we started the studio.
Wow.
When somebody just over lunch, he was like, I got this budget. I got to spend it. I got to spend it before next week. So you guys do something. And then he just left us alone for a year. And that was our first kind of project, which was under the auspices of this studio, right? Which was, hey, we were going to build things. We were going to try to scale them. We were going to try to get, build organizations internally that we could spin out or offer to other organizations. And our first project was this digital will. And it was a really great use case. They didn't end up using it, but it was a really amazing way for us to kind of start to build the company. and to build really interesting use cases using blockchain, and at the time a very early Ethereum.
Right.
You know? And that's kind of like, the midpoint to where we're at now in terms of like, how I got to what we're doing. But I would say like, those years, like as it relates to people that are listening to your podcast, right? Those years in university in Toronto for me were like, a period of discovery of who do I want to be, and facing the unknown, but also trying to forecast where the world was going and how I would fit in. And at the time, like, saying that you wanted to be an entrepreneur in like early 2000s, like in Canada, people thought you were crazy.
Right.
Like that was not a thing. It was like literally in Canada, it was like you get a job at one of the major insurance companies or get a job at the bank and you're good to go.
Right.
Get a house in the suburbs, send your kids to like, like Glen Abbey, or UCC, and you're good and you're good to go, right? And it was not like, being an entrepreneur was kind of seen as like being a little bit crazy, but there was something about like, my, maybe because of my skating background, I had seen a lot of the world. I'd been to Europe, I'd been to Australia, I'd been to all over the United States at a very young age. So I was just like, there's a lot of things out there, right? And so I would say to a lot of the people, like, being intrepid to me is really, a personal thing, but it's really just having conviction and confidence in who you are, what your abilities are, and what you can do for yourself in this world, right? And as I get older, looking back at it, I go like, God, I'm like so OG, right? Like I kind of like, paved the way for a lot of the things that like this generation kind of takes for granted. Like, like if I said to people I wanted to like, be a creator or be a content creator or do a podcast, like when I was kind of like, your age, people think I was crazy, but now like, now being like a creator, a content creator, a podcaster, a YouTuber or whatever, like is a valuable entrepreneurial career path, right?
Yeah.
Like, like you could make more doing that than you could like at a traditional job, and you have more freedom, right? So I go, part of what I'm doing now at Intrepid is going like, hey, I can go back and like reconcile some of the things that like, kind of irked me in the past, which is how do we create this infrastructure, a modern infrastructure that professionalizes being an entrepreneur, being a creator, collapsing the borders and cultural barriers between people in different parts of the world and their different skill sets so they can collaborate and create different pockets of value that had otherwise been locked off, by either education or geography, right? So allowing people to kind of, hey, I can actually work with a really great software engineer in Vietnam or in India or in Poland, and they can work with a really great content creator in New York, and they can collaborate, get paid for what they do, and create value without really having to have like, a shared physical experience like the office or a university, right? And like to me, like that's the same way I got excited about blockchain and cryptocurrency and quote unquote Web3 as they call it now is the same way that I've got excited about our current state of work or the future of work and like what the deconstruction of the office means to careers, professions, and career paths, right? So again, like those are kind of like how I kind of connect these dots where it's like I got super excited about decentralization and blockchain, and I also got super excited about, hey, COVID came, people are not in the office, and we have all these really great tools. How do we create an infrastructure that allows people to collaborate better and create value in a different way than having to be in the office, right? So I mean, a lot of these things overlapped with like my experiences where it's like when I was doing the venture studio, like we never had an office, because when I had an office doing my shoes, I just hated it. I was just like, I hated being in the office, and I had a team and they would ask me all these questions. I couldn't concentrate. So I always liked to work from home. So again, 2011, 2012, I'm doing this venture studio and I'm going, hey, I'm the black guy in Asia doing Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and I don't have an office.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it wasn't really like, a really great foundation of trust for a lot of people.
No, man, that's Honestly, I think I've heard a lot of stories about people's past, of course, like talking to them. But
Mm,
your story is so unique, and I think one of the biggest things I take away from your story is how many different fields you decided like to store yourself in, like just go ahead and try it, and it's honestly pretty inspiring to see, like for example, like you mentioned, you never designed shoes before, and you just but you seem cool, and you decided to do it, and same thing with crypto, like you didn't really know what blockchain was. You did your due diligence. It seemed like an interesting space, and you just went into it. Um, and I think that's just. I think just having that confidence to enter different spaces and not
I don't know if
necessarily
it's
feel
confidence. It's like I'll tell you a little bit of a story. There's a
okay.
common phrase in figure skating, and they go, and they say, usually kids that are younger, very very young, do a lot better in skating because
Mhm.
ignorance is bliss. They don't know what it's like to fail or to fall or to have defeats, so they're very confident. So mostly for me, it was just I didn't know anything and I didn't know anything that could go wrong. So I was really ignorant. So therefore, that ignorance gave me the ability to move forward beyond fear,
Right.
right? Because most people fear trying something and failing. But what I learned from skating was literally about failing. In order to learn a new jump, you had to fall 10,000 times. And when you fall, it hurts. So
Right.
like you have to fall, really hurt yourself, get up, and then psychologically you have to go, okay, I know I fell the last time and it hurt like hell, but I have to go up and try it again because that's the only way I'll learn. And so for me, it was just like that's been ingrained in my nature. So like I would say the common thread with like, how I pursue things is anything can be learned. It's just a matter of time and the willingness to endure the pain. And
Mhm.
that's really what learning is, right? Because like everything you start at, well, you will suck at. But
Yeah.
over time, you get better at it, right? And then when you become better at it, you become an expert in it. And so I'm always willing to suck at something. I don't mind sucking at something. And so like that's the thing. Like
Right.
when I first started shoes, I sucked. Like it was a horrible, right? But I knew that like if I get better at this over time, I could be really good at it. The same thing with
Right.
blockchain and cryptocurrency, the same thing with future work, or even now, like my last kind of thing was okay, I wanted to learn more about how to code and build my own applications. So, like learning JavaScript or SQL, or like, developing your own products at a higher level. You suck at it in the beginning, but like the the J curve is you'll suck and then you'll get better and then you'll be really good.
Right.
And you can do that over and over and over and over and over again because learning is the same process. So that's what I would say to people is just don't be afraid of learning something new
Mhm.
and spending the time to do it, right? Because a lot of people are just like, I don't want to, you know what? I already know these things and they've served me well. I don't want to learn something new. And that's really what
Yeah.
it is.
And I think to sort of add to that, I think one of the biggest problems I can say for people my age is that imposter syndrome. Like when you do
Oh, yeah.
start something new, just feeling like everybody else is so far ahead, and you're
Yeah.
starting from the ground zero. It's definitely a big challenge there.
Yeah. But, my mom has this saying where it's like life is kind of like snakes and ladders. But
Right.
she would say, like, sometimes, you have to go down to go up, right?
Mhm.
So like somebody may be high, very high on the ladder, but it's a very shallow ceiling. And you may be very low on the ladder, but the ceiling is much higher, right? So like
Mhm.
those are kind of things where it's like, whether it's like my mom like has these really crazy Trinidadian sayings that like only like later in life do I understand them because it's very like a very oral tradition in Trinidad, right? Where it's like, she'll say these things and like, at 16, I'm like, what is she talking about? But like at 30, I'm like, oh, you know.
It all makes sense
So
now.
yeah, so I would say the imposter syndrome is just part of the process, right? But
Right.
everybody starts off sucking, and like
Mhm.
that's the thing. And it's just like, hey, you will get better and you will like just like anything, right? You like, you got to crawl before you walk. And so I think I kind of approach things that way. And that's kind of like, I would say like, my friend and colleague that I work with, Zach, would say probably one of my superpowers, right? Or why people might look at me as an intrepid person. It's because I'm not afraid to suck at something.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think one other takeaway from your story also is how you sort of position yourself in sort of in the right place, the right time to meet, like, or you met the right people, or actually that's not the right way of saying it. I meant to say like you put yourself in a situation where you were able to meet people who were experts in the space and who were able to guide you, and then you make like sort of
Yeah,
carve your own path out of that.
well, I mean, I think yeah, like I would say like forgive me for the name dropping, right? But it's just these
Yeah.
people are actually quite well recognized, yeah. Now, but it was Charles. I talked to Charles. I talked to Vitalik. I was supposed to do a few projects with Joseph Lubin. Like he had just started Consensus. There's 3 people on his team.
Hmm.
My co-founders went and met him in Flatbush in his like barren warehouse that looked like a garage. Like um, we've had Yuta Steiner out here in Asia. We've had Vitalik do events out here in Asia. So it was just, I think at the time, it wasn't, I didn't think they were going to be anything significant. They were just interesting people.
Right.
And we shared a common, passion, which was, hey, we like this blockchain stuff. It wasn't anything else other than that, and it was funny because I was just talking to my friend, co-founder, Zach, yesterday, and I said, one of the things that is that gets overlooked is that, what we were really good at was just making friends and influencing people and not having an agenda, but just being really passionate, trying to be really good at what we do, and then sharing that with other people. And it just really kind of resonates, right? And I think those were, it was just people that were a part of the community. So it wasn't something that we tried to do. It was just, hey, it's a similar way to how I reached out to you in a way. I was just like, he's doing
Hmm.
something cool. I like it.
Right.
That's it. Like, and I think it just ends up happening that people like those types of people kind of go off and do cool things.
Right. Makes sense. Um, okay, so a couple more questions I guess I have before we move on to what you're doing right now and dive deeper into that.
Sure.
But you've done a couple of different ventures now. And I know you talked about some of the challenges and some of
Yeah.
the some of the experiences there, but what venture do you think was the most challenging one to pivot or go into, and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I'll try not to give the cop out answer and say like they were all difficult in their own ways,
Right.
because there is like, if I could reduce it to something that essential where it's like like I think what made it easy is just the willingness to suck and the ability to learn quickly, right? And so these are all kind of
Hmm.
things that you in technology you kind of like it's kind of taught to you. But at the time, it was just very innate to me as a person, where it's like, okay, I could iterate really fast, I could fail fast, iterate fast, and change. But I would say, venture. And here's why I would say venture
Okay.
is the most challenging. Is just it's it's still like there's a lot of hype around venture, but it's still a cottage industry. And what I mean by that, it's like it's it's not a meritocracy. It's not even close to a meritocracy. It's really kind of like, hey, we know rich people, or we're part of the same school or the same club and the same group, and I know you from so and so and so, and this family knows this family, and therefore we all have this kind of like inner circle of a cabal, and then we get to decide who we're going to make kings out of in a venture community. And I think it's changing,
Right.
but breaking into that is really challenging, um,
Hmm.
because you have to be kind of like an outlier. You've either, especially when I was coming up, you either had to have had your own money, like a successful exit, your own money where you were making your own investments, and some of those were successful in order for you to get the attention of LPs, or you had to have been, part of, a very elite, and exclusive group of people that went to Stanford, Harvard, Wharton, whatever, and worked in these small, close-knit communities of companies. And that's all kind of coming out in the wash now. So like, me coming up in the early 2000s, I was lucky to be in RBC at that team, but it was by freak accident, right? I was somebody that at the age of 23, as coming from an immigrant family, being Caribbean Canadian, working in venture capital. And like, I see now, like especially what's happening in America, like I took for granted that like I had that position. Like, to me, it was just normal. But like for a lot of communities that have been on the outside, like that is not the norm, and like it's kind of coming out now, right? So I realized like how kind of exclusive and privileged I was. But like, when I was going through it, a lot of the frustrations that I had, I didn't understand why it was happening. And I think it was a lot of those kind of like, institutional or systemic biases that were kind of part of that industry that made it really challenging, right? And I think those are all kind of breaking down now. But, going through it was really, really challenging, really challenging, right? So it's like, hey, why did that guy get, like $5 million for his company and I'm doing 3 times as much revenue as he is? Like it's like I couldn't, like, I'm like, what's going on? Okay, just got to be better, or like, hey, how did they raise that fund? Oh, they know so and so and so and so. So it's really came down to that kind of stuff where it's like it had nothing to do with like, how good your product was or how good your service was. It really came down to, are you a part of a community that this kind of these types of businesses thrive in? And I would say venture was definitely the most frustrating because it really had nothing to do with how good you were at anything. And like,
that makes sense.
And like just in general, right? Like I could blindfold a monkey and like give it darts and throw it at a wall, and that monkey would be as good as any VC investor. It's pretty much like that. Right? So anybody going on like that, they know like the future and stuff like that, really they're literally playing Powerball. Right.
Throw enough money at enough companies and hopefully one of them works out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have like, like I think if you're like, obviously if you're in San Francisco, the odds of you being successful with startups are greatly improved because there's a culture for that, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, like I think any VC or anybody that says that they know or they've got like an amazing track record, like, it really needs to examine like, their different privileges and entitlements and their positioning in the world that allows them to have that. And that's a part of the strategy. It's definitely a part of the strategy, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say, yeah, venture, someone from my background in my region of the world doing venture was challenging, right? Whereas like when I did shoes or a product, like it's either the customer likes it or they don't. Right. So it's like, it's pretty much like that, so it's like, there's similar things in tech, right? But when it comes to venture, it's like, why does one fund get funded over another fund, right? It's not because of their internal rate of return. It's not that reason, so I would say venture is probably the most challenging. Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting. Like even now, I mean, you were in venture almost what, 20, 25 years ago now?
Yeah.
It's like even now I see that to some degree in venture. It has changed a lot, but I can't even imagine what it must have been like 20, 25 years ago.
It's still similar, right? Like it's like, if you're friends with certain founders and you're friends and then they've been invested in. So even like, what they encourage you to do, like in terms of how you raise funds, right, is be friends with founders. Founders introduce you to their investors. That signals to the investor that if I've got a good portfolio company and they've made an introduction, therefore this person may be good. But those are all very kind of like closed networks, right?
Right.
So like, so this is what getting to like, our point earlier, which is like, when founders get to know each other, right, it's like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? But if you don't come from a community where like, there's a lot of other founders, a lot of other founders getting funded. Getting into these networks is quite challenging, right? It's not like a
Mhm.
real meritocracy, right? I think there are companies, like Y Combinator is, I think they do the best job because literally like they have a form. They go, fill out the form. Like you could be from anywhere, fill out the form. If you fill out the form and like we like what we see, then you get an interview. Like I get it. Like that's like
Right.
the best way to do it. But for a lot of other communities around the world, right, it's not like that. It's like, hey, do you know so and so and so and so? And
Mhm.
did they make an introduction? And because they made an introduction, you have more credence, which is ridiculous, right? They could like a lot of the times VCs just don't do their job. They should be trying to find the outlier, not waiting
Right.
for the outlier to come through their network. Like it's just crazy to me.
Mhm. That makes sense. Yeah. And I think like actually a lot of the new funds I've seen have sort of pivoted towards that way now, right? They are making that effort, and that's sort of how they're trying to innovate in the space.
Yeah.
Um, so it'll be really interesting to see like what the future of venture capital looks like. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense in terms of your challenges there. So thanks for sharing that. But yeah, transitioning a little bit. So I know we talked about your super interesting story from start to almost end. But now let's talk about what you're doing right now. So let's dive a little bit deeper. I know you talked a little bit about Intrepid, but and how it's facilitating work from home and collaboration around the world. But let's talk about the product and the company and go dive deeper into the details. So
Sure. I mean,
let's
like,
start with the product.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, essentially, at its core, there's two things. There's the employment contract or contracts for, independent freelancers around the world. And then there's invoicing. And so, what
Mhm.
we do, and we call them the buy side and the sell side. The buyer is an employer, so a startup or a company or somebody who wants to hire someone to do a specific task or project. Through our employment contracts, we digitize and structure data so we can help you hire people in any country around the world in a compliant way and make payments to them almost instantly. From that,
Mhm.
we also allow you as like the person hiring to customize benefits for that employee in their local country, right? So in a lot of cases from work from home, like, one of the major distractions is for people who have kids or elderly parents, is that the benefit for them working at home is that they can take care of their kids or they can take care of their parents. But it also can become a distraction to their work. So like the types of benefits that we offer is like, hey, as an employer, I can offer childcare services for X amount of hours or days a week, or elderly care services, or food delivery, or certain kinds of allocations for building a work from home office. So that makes that employee comfortable. And it gives you a different way of attracting talent from anywhere in the world. So that's one of the kind
Mhm.
of features that we offer through Intrepid for an employer. The other one is contracting. So, like, hey, you might want to hire somebody to do something based on milestones or on a fixed rate or based on certain deliverables. And we actually make that process really, really simple. And the payments for that really simple for you to do that anywhere in the world. What makes us different than some of the other kind of human resource management systems is our geographic coverage, the insurance and the benefits that we offer different people. But we also have an integrated marketplace. So as
Mhm.
I was doing these, like kind of like the studio Intrepid, we got to know a lot of really great engineers, agencies, and freelancers from around the world. Really, really, really amazing, talented people that were all looking for opportunities. And what we found was there was a lot of companies that were looking for these types of people with these skills, but they didn't have a mechanism or a way of onboarding these types of people, whether it was because of internal compliance issues or whether they just didn't know that these people existed. So a lot of what we do is helping organizations discover talent without having to search for it. So most people, when
Right.
they're looking for someone to help them to do something, they have to go and they have to put up a job ad, they have to search on LinkedIn, or they have to go to Upwork and they have to do this endless searching. So what we do is we go, hey, why don't you just put in the key things that you value, what your company's strategy is, what are your needs, what are your core strengths, And then we'll turn that into some kind of structured data or an algorithm, if you will. And we'll have the sell side, or the people that are actually, offering these services, do the same things. And then we can programmatically match you guys. So you get a feed of people and teams that can help you solve these problems in your organization at the right budget, in the right time zone, right language, right skill set, without you having to look for them. So
Right.
we help you contract, we help you find, and we help you pay.
Right. That makes
So
sense.
on the sell side, like, so these people, like these freelancers or these agencies that are around the world, their issue is customer acquisition. They go, we've got these really great skills. We know how to program in Solidity. We know Rust. We make mobile applications. We've worked on fintech before. Our challenge is that we're looking for customers or clients that are outside of our geography. So you may be a team in Poland, anywhere between 1 to 3 people, up to 200 people. And you're all looking for like these different types of organizations that could use your skill sets. So we provide them a way, 2 things. We help them discover these types of clients. And then through this tool that we've got, this one product, this invoicing product, we're one of the first companies that provides invoice factoring for services. So similar to, and this was a concept that I took from Intrepid. So a lot of times when I sent shoes to a store, they would have to open up what's called, they'd have to give me like their information, and I'd have to open up what's called a letter of credit. So the factory would know that I was able to pay for the shoes as they delivered them to me, because we'd have to fund the production. So similar to that, I was just like, okay, well, in the modern knowledge economy, right? Like, the deliverable is more intangible. It's a service, but it does have a kind of final asset, which is an application code or whatever. But what if we could actually finance that in the same way that people would finance, goods? And so we actually allow people that are like, doing web, mobile, data science, blockchain development, NFTs, and providing those services to others, a way for them to factor their invoices. And what does that mean? That means that they can offer payment terms to their clients up to 90 days or in installments. So, which is a big deal. So that means as a small startup, you have the ability, if you're looking for someone to help you get the MVP out or a certain product feature out, you get 90 day payment terms. Or you could split that across 4 or 5 different payments, which is a big deal in terms of like, your cash and your burn rate. So you can get products out a lot faster. You can onboard people that are more aligned with what you need to do because we've matched them with you, and it's a form of financing that you get that you wouldn't otherwise get for your product development. So it helps the startups or the organizations, and it helps the freelancers or the agencies acquire more clients because they can provide them with better terms. So that's how we kind of balance the 2 sides of the marketplace, where we go, hey, we give you guys really good contracting and contracting, payment, benefit, and financial terms, and then we connect you guys based on key values, strategy, needs, and capabilities, so that it's a good cultural fit for whoever you actually start to work with.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting space because now more than ever the world is super connected, and people can really work wherever now, and like the pandemic has definitely exacerbated that, but it was a change that was going to happen regardless. So it's just really great to see talent from around the world being able to connect with companies regardless of geographic location and situations. So I think making a company in that space makes a lot of sense. And because I only see it getting bigger and better. Like I think companies have definitely seen the value in that as well, and finding talent around globally and not limiting themselves.
And then we help with like things like, so this came up like when we were working with AIA, which was they wanted to build this application. Nobody in their company had those skills. And so they started to want to hire those types of people. They go, can we get blockchain engineers? And I was like, yeah, good luck, right? Like if you're a blockchain engineer at this time, why would you come and work for AIA for $100,000 a year? Like you just wouldn't.
Right.
Right. So they had this skills gap. And the second thing that they had was, okay, like, yes, if we did want to work with a contract team, they have to go through all this compliance. And it was just
Yep.
like a myriad of different, contracts, right? So like, part of what we do too is making the onboarding for these, a smaller organization to a larger organization, so they can they can discover each other, but they can be onboarded a lot easier. So now a large organization who has compliance issues, like know your business, know your customer, what's the entity, where like, where are they located, how do they pay, we can actually help them do that. And like the payment terms came from that type of an experience too, where it's like AIA wants to work with you, but they go, great, we'll pay you 90 days after you deliver all your work. So you
Right.
go like you end up financing AIA, right? So like to a small company, they just can't do that, right? But to
Right.
AIA, like, they can do that because they're a large organization, right? So I think, we looked at that and we said, how do we kind of like, deconstruct and disconnect these parts that have really kind of hindered innovation and the way that people can work together. And it was only because of COVID and like, people not connecting in offices did this become more and more prevalent into the fore of like, how people are trying to organize their companies. So
Hmm.
we kind of facilitate those things, and we plan on expanding. Really there's two challenges with this kind of remote work and this kind of a model, which is how do you build corporate culture in a remote environment, and then how do you create bonds and relationships, right? So we're trying to tackle those issues, whether it's like with our matching algorithm, right, asking certain kind of questions, because we believe that working together is more like dating than it is like search, right?
Right.
So you should
Hmm.
match on a certain level, right? And but then still people do crave human connection. So it's like, I'm in Thailand and I've been like kind of like remote and a digital nomad my entire career. So I go, I'm fascinated by these types of organizations now that are kind of creating communities around locations and shared experiences, but then people then
Right.
kind of disperse to their own places, right? But still feel a connection because they've had, an in-person experience. So like, reimagining what the office can be like, maybe in an international context, within a community context, is kind of like the next phase of what we're looking at. And it all kind of stems from this idea of,
Right.
hey, what is the future of work and how can we create connection, but still be efficient?
Right. And I think like the cat's out of the bag. Like I think because everybody went remote, a lot of people want to stay remote. And so
Yeah,
I definitely think like the future work is definitely gonna, like, especially in software, right? Like software was already moving towards that, but especially in software engineering and software in general, a lot of people want to stay remote.
yeah,
So there's definitely a lot of merit to that. And I think if you look at a lot of big companies, like I have a friend, for example, who was working at Shopify.
mm,
So Shopify went full remote, and in the same way as you're saying, the way they're trying to facilitate that culture is by organizing experiences for their customers,
yeah,
and they're not for their
yeah,
customers, but for their employees.
yeah.
And so they're a big company, so they can easily do that. But for these other companies where they don't necessarily have that, that's also a nice, great next step too, to help them out with that.
Yeah, I think like, in a way, like it's like a Napster moment. Like, you guys, your audience might be too young for Napster, but like, you know, COVID, it really has changed the way the way companies will organize themselves. And I think they'll look at themselves more as a kind of like uh, a community that interfaces with other
Mm,
communities, as opposed to like a walled garden, right? So you're going to see like more collaboration, not only amongst people in the organization, but with other organizations that they work with. And it may be, hey, they go to a certain place and they connect for a month, and then they go back to where they were, and they do that with another group or another group of people, and they do that, in different places depending on where they're located. Or there's this really great company that I really admire. Uh, it's called Cody, and
mm,
it's kind of like Airbnb for corporations. And so she's allowed people to set up home offices in the suburbs
okay.
where organizations can like have their team meet in these home offices instead of commuting into the city or commuting into the office.
Interesting.
So it's really interesting because it's like, really the thing is like, cutting down on the commute time, but allowing people that, if you work for Microsoft, there might be a lot of people that live in the same suburb, right? So like, okay, you want them to connect. They might not want to connect in their own home, but they might go to somebody else's home that's set up to do that, and they can work there and collaborate. And it's only a 5-minute drive instead of a 30-minute drive or an hour-long drive or whatever, right? And
Mhm.
so I find organizations like that are reimagining how people work and collaborate, whether it's in a local sphere or in an international sphere or on a very large scale, some of the more interesting types of companies. And to me, it's just as interesting as what's going on with cryptocurrency, but it's not as sexy and as like, and as it's hyped up, but it's just as transformational.
Right. Right. Makes sense. Transitioning a little bit. So I know, like we've talked about in this podcast, you're a man of many interests. You've gone a lot of different fields. What is the space or technology for you right now that really excites you?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I mean, I've always kind of sought out, I'm still really interested in things across the blockchain space. I have a few bones to pick with a lot of things that are being made right now because there's just very little utility. And what I mean by
Mhm.
utility is there's only so much gaming, gambling, and entertainment I can take with crypto. Like that's
Right.
all there
Right.
is like, hey, how can I flip these tokens to somebody else who could flip these tokens to somebody else who could flip these tokens to somebody else? Like there's like that use case is already done. But I'm still
Hmm.
interested in the space. Like I was saying, like future of work. I'm really interested in communities. I'm really interested. So communities, content creation. Uh, the caveat that I have with that is like I don't like this term influencer is really annoying to me,
Hmm.
because I go I really think influence is being conflated with solo advertiser, right? So like
Right.
if you're influential, it's because you're competent and you're an expert in a certain subject area. Therefore, you're
Mhm.
influential. But if you're just shilling soap on YouTube or, or a
Makes
VPN,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
You're not an influencer. You're a salesman.
Right.
You are just a new mechanism for advertisers to reach an audience instead of ads,
Hmm.
right? You're just a human face to an ad that can't be done programmatically. But if you're someone influential, right, it's because you're competent, you're substantive, and what you say or do shifts the way that people think about a particular subject. So I would like to see
Right.
people that are creating content and uh, creating content focus more on that. But I do like the kind of creator economy. Um,
Hmm.
lastly, I would say what is really exciting. So yeah, so we have crypto and blockchain, creator, future of work, communities. Sorry, communities. Um, I think they're very powerful. Uh, I don't know how. Really I can't predict what like the end state will be, but I think communities are very very powerful, and we don't realize how much people want to be associated with something that they're interested in that they can call their
Right.
own, right?
Hmm.
I think why Discord has become so popular. I mean, I personally am not a fan of Discord, but I can
Hmm.
see why it's popular. Reddit, again, I'm not a fan of Reddit. There's nothing wrong with it. I have nothing bad to say about it, but like I just don't get it. But I could see why it's popular, right?
Right.
It's a place where people kind of can connect, they can share interests, and they can feel a part of something, right? And
Hmm.
I think for a long time, the technology community has kind of shunned the intangible things. And they looked at very kind of scientific, metrics driven, objective things as a way of driving, you know, quote unquote value, to the detriment or the neglect of these things that are intangible, human, and emotional. And there's a pendulum shift towards these things.
Right.
And I think community is one of them, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense. And then lastly, I would say, So we covered blockchain, crypto, creators, and community. Metaverse is actually pretty, again, like, I think, the new technologies have struggled with finding the right marketing nomenclature. Metaverse
Right.
is kind of like, people, it drives people the wrong way. But again, if you investigate your skepticism, it's probably one of the more useful applications of cryptocurrency. Like, there is a underlying productive asset, which is the scarce digital kind of real estate. You can build digital experiences on top of this. Therefore, it has, some kind of, productive means, and you can sell things through that. So I think, metaverse
Mhm.
and fashion, like, is actually really a big deal. Is a really, really, really
Right.
big deal. And it kind of takes me full circle, because it's like I started in fashion, I did a little blockchain. I have a lot of friends who've been like hitting me up going like, how do I make an NFT for my brand? And, like, how do I
Right.
get, how do I create a store in Decentraland? Things like that. And I think that, as wild as they may seem, um, I think it's going to create a lot of really, again, entertaining experiences, but that will have real value. So that's kind of
Right.
like, the things that I look at. And then lastly, I would say something that hits me very personally is I'm a huge fan of and follower of the no code community. I think
Right.
it's a it's
Mhm.
a it's a really big deal, and like, again, like, people are struggling with the nomenclature, but to me, no code is really about making is providing accessibility
Right.
to technology, right?
Mhm.
Is that if more people have the ability to create, more people have the ability to participate in the economy, in the digital economy, the better it is for everybody. Because while diversity in products, diversity in services, better communities. So I think no code is a really, really, really big deal, because it provides an on ramp to a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't have had it. So
Right.
big, big booster for no code. And a lot of people think that, like, no code is like going to replace engineers, but it's just not.
Right.
I think a lot of the times it's engineers that are making these no code tools for themselves, because they're so sick and tired of doing auth for like the 1500th time, right? So they just like
Right.
they automate it for themselves. You're just like, great, now I never have to make that again. And guess what? Oh, maybe somebody else could use it too.
Right, right. That makes sense. No, those are all super interesting fields. I gotta definitely consider those given how forward thinking you've been. Time to make a startup in those spaces. But no, that's super interesting, man. I know we're almost at an hour, or we're past an hour now, so
Mm,
I want to be cognizant of your time, and I want to make sure we're wrapping things up. So just as the last question for you, what are next
sure.
steps for you in Intrepid?
I think, the next steps, we're going to be launching our platform probably in the next couple weeks.
Mhm.
So we're really looking for anybody that's running, again, like a no code studio or a no code freelancer, anybody that's working with Web3, blockchain, crypto. I would love it if they signed up. Any small businesses, early stage startups that are looking to find really great talent to help them grow their business. We're here to help them kind of find those people and then onboard them. So like, that's the next thing for us.
Mhm.
And then after that, we're going to be exploring a kind of like a redux of Intrepid Ventures, which was the venture studio,
Right.
but more kind of updated for where we are today. So more like a kind of like a launch house, and we'll probably do that here in Thailand, in
Mhm.
Phuket. So we'll run some programming for um, hackers and founders to come and do a residency in Phuket, have really great programming, some really great speakers across a variety of different sectors. People will be able to participate online as well too, and then yeah, ramping that aspect up of what we do. So bringing like talent from all around the world to organizations, and then providing organizations around the world a way to connect in real life in a new and an exciting way is kind of what's next for us.
Perfect, man. And I love to have you back on the podcast. A really great time talking with you today.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much, man, for coming on the podcast. And for anyone listening, till the next one, please take care, stay safe, and see you on the next podcast.